It was supposed to be just a simple surgical procedure, but what happened inside that hospital left everyone perplexed. Jose Antonio woke up with an uncomfortable feeling. During his morning shower, his gaze fixed on a strange large mole that had appeared on his body. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, as if it had been drawn there. The dark, irregular mole contrasted with the paleness of her aged skin. Intrigued and a little worried, Jose Antonio decided to share his discovery with his daughter, Cristina. She was a young, lively woman who often visited him in his lonely home. The bond between father and daughter was strong, and he trusted her as his safe haven. As they sat in the living room, Jose Antonio showed Cristina the mole, who frowned when she saw it. Her eyes filled with concern as she examined the mark in question closely. She was a cautious person, and any change in her father's body made her apprehensive. "Dad, this doesn't seem normal," Cristina said, her voice cracking with a slight tremor of anxiety. "I think we should see a doctor to check this out." Jose was reluctant at first. He was a resilient man, accustomed to facing life's challenges without showing weakness. But the look of concern on his daughter's face was undeniable, and he knew he couldn't ignore this issue. "You're right, my daughter. Let's make an appointment with the doctor and clarify this situation." He agreed, admiring the care Cristina had for him. She had inherited her late mother's protective spirit, always willing to take care of loved ones. A few days passed, until the day of the appointment arrived. Jose Antonio and Cristina arrived at the doctor's office, where they were greeted by a serious and competent professional. He examined the mole carefully, making notes in the doctor's medical record. His eyes were experienced, but Jose Antonio could see a small expression of concern forming on the doctor's face. After a brief moment of silence, the doctor looked at Jose Antonio and said, "This mole is unusual, and although I can't say for sure, it would be best to remove it to avoid future problems. It's a simple and quick procedure. After the removal, we will be able to assess whether it is benign or not." Jose Antonio nodded, trusting the doctor's expertise, but a hint of anxiety settled in his heart. He didn't want to worry his daughter, but there was a part of him that feared the unknown. Cristina, who had been listening to the conversation attentively, noticed her father's uneasiness. She knew he was brave, but he also had the right to have his apprehensions. Holding his hand tenderly, she whispered softly, "Dad, we're in this together. I'm sure everything will be fine. We'll take care of this together," Cristina said with conviction. Cristina's comforting words calmed Jose Antonio, bringing him some comfort. He knew he had his daughter's support throughout the process. With a tender smile on his lips, he thanked her for always being by his side. The days leading up to the surgery were marked by a mixture of anxiety and hope. Jose had diabetes and high blood pressure, so Cristina decided to research the procedure in depth, looking for information to calm her father down and to feel more prepared. She wanted everything to go well and for her father to recover quickly. However, the night before the surgery, Cristina had a disturbing dream. She found herself in a place filled with light, with her father standing in front of her, looking at her with a serene smile. Although the atmosphere was comforting, the dream left her perplexed and with a feeling of uncertainty. Upon waking, Cristina felt an urge to share her dream with Jose Antonio. She found him serene, peacefully eating his breakfast. With a hint of apprehension, she decided to tell him about the dream. "Father, I had a strange dream last night," Cristina began, choosing her words carefully. "I saw you in a place full of light, looking at me with a smile. It was comforting, but it also made me worried." Jose Antonio listened attentively, and his eyes met Cristina's. He placed his hand over hers, transmitting reassurance and calm. "My dear, dreams are curious things. Sometimes they can have deep meanings, while other times they can be just reflections of our thoughts and emotions," he explained, trying to calm her. She knew the surgery was supposed to be simple, but there was a voice inside her that whispered doubts and worries. The dream intensified these feelings, leaving her with a lump in her throat and a bad feeling. "But Dad, I'm scared. I'm afraid something will go wrong during the surgery," she confessed, struggling to keep her voice steady. "What if I'm ignoring a warning?" "My dear, life is a series of uncertainties. But we have to trust the health professionals who are taking care of us." They dedicate their lives to helping others. Besides, dreams are not always premonitions. They can just be fragments of our thoughts and fears, mixed together in an unknown scenario. Christina smiled, trying to avoid conveying her insecurity to her father. But inside, a restlessness consumed her. That dream had been very strange, and she couldn't get it out of her head. Little by little, the weight of her worries began to slowly dissipate, and she decided to trust her father's words, believing that everything would be okay. On the day of the surgery, Christina stopped by Mr. Jose's house early to take him to the hospital. It was a beautiful, sunny day. Before he went into the operating room, she reassured him, reminding him that everything would be quick and painless and that she would be right there, anxiously waiting for him. Despite her own nervousness, she maintained a confident expression, determined to be the pillar of strength her father needed. As Christina waited anxiously in the waiting room, time seemed to drag slowly. The doctor had explained that the surgery would be quick, but it seemed to be taking longer than necessary, and it was already making Christina nervous. She alternated her gaze between the clock and the door to the operating room, counting the minutes that had already passed, expecting that at any moment her father would emerge, unharmed and smiling. The waiting room was full of people, each with their own worries and apprehensions. The air echoed with whispers of comfort and hope, but all of that seemed to fade before Christina's ears. She was lost in her own thoughts and worried that her dream might represent something. Christina looked for any distraction to calm her agony. She looked at the outdated magazines spread out on the coffee table, but the words and images seemed blurry and meaningless. Her gaze drifted to the television in the corner of the room, where some random program was trying to capture her attention, but her worries were too great to be dispelled by mere distractions. The surgery was expected to last 30 minutes, but 50 minutes had already passed. Christina was torn between hope and fear. Every beat of his heart was accompanied by doubt. Why was it taking so long? Could there have been some complication due to his diabetes? His mind was a whirlwind of dark thoughts, fueled by uncertainty and lack of control over the situation. Finally, the imposing door to the operating room opened. Christina, her heart beating even faster, turned her attention to the doctor, who approached with a solemn expression. "Who is Mr. Jose Antonio's family?" the doctor asked, as his eyes searched the people in the waiting room. Christina stood up shakily, fighting the apprehension that threatened to overwhelm her. "It's me, I'm his daughter," she replied in a wavering voice. The doctor approached slowly, the news weighing heavily on his shoulders. His lips moved in slow motion as he spoke the words that would change Christina's life forever. "I'm sorry, but there were complications during the surgery. Your father didn't make it and passed away." Christina's world seemed to crumble before her eyes. A scream caught in her throat, choked off by the shock and pain that gripped her being. Tears flooded her eyes, blurring her vision and obscuring the world around her. Her body shook with a mixture of sadness, anger, and confusion. Christina staggered, feeling her legs weaken under the unbearable weight of loss. She looked for something to hold on to, but everything seemed to be out of her reach. The floor seemed to move, and the waiting room seemed like a maze with no exit. Despair enveloped her like a suffocating shadow. People around her murmured words of comfort, trying to reach her pain-torn soul. But their voices were only distant whispers, unable to penetrate the veil of sadness that enveloped her. The life she had known, so full of love and connection, had been shattered in an instant. Christina remembered the last words she had exchanged with her father before the surgery. Words filled with hope and trust. Now, it all seemed ironic and cruel. She questioned her own intuition, whether she should have followed her hunch that something was wrong. Guilt began to weigh on her shoulders, mixing with the sadness that consumed her. Time seemed suspended, as if the universe had frozen in that moment of pain. Christina struggled to find a way to move on, to accept the reality that had been imposed on her. But the emptiness in her chest seemed insurmountable, an open wound that would never completely heal. However, amidst the chaos of her emotions, a familiar and beloved voice cut through the deafening silence. "Christina, what happened? Why are you so shaken?" Christina could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her father, Jose Antonio, was standing before her, alive and well. Her eyes widened in surprise and relief as she struggled to process what was happening. With a mixture of disbelief and joy, Christina ran to hug her father, clinging to him as if her life depended on it. Tears of happiness mixed with the tears of sadness that still stained her face. Confused and surprised, Jose Antonio explained that the surgery had been a success, and that it had taken so long because the surgeon had to attend to an emergency that had arisen with another patient. He could not understand the intensity of Christina's emotions, but he was happy that everything had gone well. After the big scare, Christina felt angry. Furious and outraged by the doctor's gross mistake, she confronted him. Christina accused him of negligence and incompetence, demanding justice for the emotional trauma that had been inflicted on her. The doctor apologized repeatedly, embarrassed by his mistake, and explained that there was another patient there named Jose Antonio. But despite the doctor's sincere apologies, no words could erase the distress Christina had experienced. Still furious, she did not accept the apology and promised that she would do everything she could to hold the hospital accountable for such a cruel mistake. However, the doctor, although shaken by her words, tried to calm her down. He explained that the mistake was an unfortunate coincidence, and that steps would be taken to prevent something like that from happening again. He asked Christina to look at the situation from a broader perspective, to reflect and be grateful for the opportunity to have her father by her side again. "Christina, I apologize again for the mistake, but you should feel privileged to have a second chance with your father, because now another daughter will be crying in your place." Christina remained silent, and the doctor's words echoed in her mind, making her reflect. She put herself in the shoes of Jose Antonio's family, who had just passed away, imagining the pain they would feel upon receiving the sad news of his death. Christina then realized that she was actually very lucky, because unlike her, the story of another daughter, unfortunately, could not have a happy ending.